Okay. All right. So we're back from our breakout rooms. I hope you guys had an opportunity to chat and think about some of the things you learned in the course and possible applications. So I'm just going to take one question, and while I answer this question, we haven't seen too many questions, so please chat and throw them some of the things you learned in the chat so that we can begin to answer them. So the first question we had was from Nason, and it was really, what is a supply chain controller? How is this purchase set up? Where do we begin to obtain one? So, at this point, the supply chain control tower is really, it's a very popular term in consulting. So I've seen it talked about with the Accenture and Capgemini and other consulting firms, and what it's proposed to do. And there's a couple businesses offering supply chain control towers, but it's really integrating all the different pieces of the supply chain system. So it really tries to bring together the end-to-end supply chain, make it collaborative, aligned, agile, demand-driven. So what it's trying to do is pull real-time data from from a company's existing integrated data management and transactional systems, and really kind of facilitate a more real-time, real real information, one truth kind of information together. So of course this is ideal. So your existing supply chain systems have to have good data. They have to be in a certain amount of time. And the other part is really, the fact that it's collaborative. There has to be sign-on from your suppliers and customers to provide that kind of information to integrate into a supply chain control tower. So a lot of the ways that I've seen at this point with control towers is really, it's sort of a 3PL or a third party managing the control tower and bringing together all those pieces, possibly a consulting firm implementation. So, I hesitate to say, exactly where you can go out and buy one, but, I'd certainly do your research on, what are some very, prevalent, options for this. There are many, and, figuring out exactly what each provides, obviously we've given you the tools now at this point to look at what are sort of the pros and cons and various needs within different supply chain solutions, and whether a supply chain control tower could be the right solution for your business. The other challenge is that because it's real time, it requires very independent management. So you need people manning that control tower, as opposed to some of the other supply chain systems that sort of have peripheral management by different departments. This is very much control, executing real time, making sure that the data is being managed appropriately so that you can get that real time and kind of very sophisticated analytics. So it's still sort of an early days kind of topic, but I know that it's coming in more popularity, especially as companies are starting to think more about end-to-end supply chain for possibly omni-channel or visibility upstream. So definitely something I would do some of your own due diligence on learning about it. So I hope that answers that question on supply chain control tower. And then we're just, feel free to throw in some questions now. Hopefully, whether it be just an anecdote or a question about the course, and we're happy to address them now. So I think the question that just came on, what are the current applications within the supply chain world for blockchain? Okay, so that's a doozy. So there's blockchain is, I'm sure if you haven't heard blockchain, then of course it's been floating. That word's been floating around everywhere, right? So it's really the system that Bitcoin is built on, as we all learned in sort of the overview for blockchain. And some of the immediate applications, some of it is supply chain contracts. So really, digitizing supply chain contracts and sort of automating some of that process. So if you want more insight, we have the video with Professor Abel Sanchez on blockchain. So I definitely recommend watching that, because he has some really nice kind of recap on where it's going to be applications in supply chain. But the other factor that's really driving, and of course I have a personal interest in this for blockchain, is this visibility issue. So as we all know, there's really a lot of challenge in data management and supply chains, right? There's ownership problems, so I don't want to share my data with my buyer because they might be able to use it against me to figure out costs and things like that. So although that limits sort of this ability to do a lot of very strategic supply chain planning and ensuring reduce risk and things like that. So one thing that the blockchain does is sort of serve as this neutral data ledger, right? So then you can access to that that information about possibly a product or a specific supply chain, and have that accessibility and continuity of that information, as well as that it can't be modified or changed anyway. So some of this is really enabling traceability for products, so that you can have a chain of custody in terms of from possibly raw material to end of life, and being able to have that information shared and jointly across the supply chain. There's a lot of different challenges that also Abel talks about, about permissions. So who's allowed to access that data, who's allowed to, because there's permissionless systems and there's permission systems. So again, this is some of the very in-depth information on how blockchain specifically works. So I'll say some of the big pieces are very much on visibility and traceability, and then on contracts. So I recommend going to that video. If you haven't seen it, then there's obviously a lot of information there, and the wealth of information out there about blockchain and its applications. Okay, so then we have Param has a question on real-time rerouting of trucks based on weather issues or road disruptions. So, I think that this is something that is in occurrence now, right? So you have sort of these transportation optimization systems that are based on dated data. So I think that it's very much something actually, Matthias hopefully touched on in his, I believe. Yes, I believe he touched on a little bit, but I'd definitely look into Dr. Matthias Winkenbach. He has a lab called the Megacity Logistics Lab, and this is actually some of the very much information that they're looking on right now. So looking at sort of this real-time logistics management, so whether you're getting that information about disruptions in the supply chain and possibly making decisions on the ground. I hesitate to say, that's active in many transportation systems, but I know that sort of this real-time, kind of GPS tracing on trucks and translating that back to headquarters and being able to reroute based on real-time information is very much an active issue emerging right now, where if you want real efficiency in your transportation management, then you are starting to think about that. So I think that that's very much in discussions now, and some companies are beginning to really take that into account and use real-time information. So we have we have an experience, sort of an anecdote from Robert, and the great. We love to hear this kind of anecdote that he's really been able to use a lot of the supply chain course, because he has sort of limited experience in the supply chain field. So he's a project manager for IoT and a blockchain project for supply chain called SmartLog. So it sounds like Robert's an expert we should be talking to about blockchain applications and supply chain, because he's obviously managing a project directly on that. So we'd love to hear those kind of stories that you're really actively working on, using this information. That's really, not to be too much of a sap here, but this is what drives us, that we are really hoping to facilitate your work as supply chain professionals, and that in this way you can advance your careers and your learnings. And so, hearing how you can use this every day is really, really what drives us, and what really gets us gets us up in the morning with a big cup of coffee. So I think I don't see Arthur. Let's see if there's any other questions. Connor, do you have any comments you want to throw in? I'm not seeing any. We're kind of coming down to the end here, so I think, Connor, any last questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
No, I think I'm all set here. So I really appreciate the time that I've had here with you guys, and I really appreciate you inviting me out to do this with you guys.
Great. Thanks, Connor. Thanks for joining. Connor's been such a key component of this course. He's been essential to so many of the things you guys touch every day in this course. So we're so lucky to have him. So we're just glad that you're able to join us today. And just as a, recap, if I haven't recapped enough, final exam opens next Wednesday, 1500 UTC. So, as far as this week is sort of the prep week, take some time to recap the course. That was part of why we held this session here, to kind of refresh. It's been, a long 10 weeks. So what we've done throughout the course, it's going to be equally split between the two courses, obviously with a little bit extra emphasis on the latter half of the course, but the weeks 1 through 4 will also be tested on as well. So, go back through the key concepts. We've uploaded, a new version that includes all of the lessons, excluding week 10, since you won't be tested on that. As far as, a graded assignment due tomorrow. And then also, if you had a chance to do the open response assessment, your peer assessment is due tomorrow on that. So if you had a chance to take a look at that, please do, make sure to submit that tomorrow. And the last final note is that we will have the CFX session next week. Monday at 1600 UTC with Dr. Ponce and myself. Please join that if you're planning to take the CFX, which will be held early February of next year. And at that point, we'll answer a lot of those questions. And so I think we'll wrap it up for the day. And thanks a lot. And we'll see you again soon.